The fluorescent lights flickered weakly above as Clara Mason clutched her hospital gown, trembling from more than just the cold. Her fingers, pale and cracked, gripped the sheets tightly as the nurse beside her gently tried to coax her to lie back down. "You need to rest, Clara," the nurse said softly, her eyes kind but firm. I want to hold him. Please," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. Her son, her tiny newborn, had only entered the world minutes ago, but already there were murmurs of paperwork, signatures, and decisions being made without her. Outside the delivery room stood two sharply dressed individuals from the State Child Services Department. They exchanged glances as the baby cried in the adjoining room, away from Clara's reach. The young woman had been flagged the moment she entered the hospital. She had no stable income, no known partner, and a documented history of mental health issues. To them, Clara Mason was just another statistic, a woman incapable of raising a child safely. But they didn't know Clara. They didn't know the nights she had spent working 2 minimum wage jobs while pregnant, just to save enough for diapers and a bassinet. They didn't know she had beaten back the worst of her depression alone, without meds, terrified they might harm her baby. They didn't know how deeply, how ferociously, she loved the child she hadn't even held yet. "Please," Clara said again, this time louder, struggling to push herself up. "Just once. Let me hold my son." The nurse hesitated. The two officials stepped in. One of them, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses, spoke in the practiced tone of someone who had done this too many times. "Miss Mason, due to the emergency protective custody order filed earlier, you are not permitted to hold or interact with the infant until a full evaluation is completed." "But he's my baby," Clara cried out, her voice rising, filling the room with a raw, aching desperation. "You can't just take him." The woman beside the man, a young social worker with kind but nervous eyes, shifted uncomfortably. "We understand this is painful, but this is about the child's safety and welfare." Clara's sobs filled the sterile space. She had known this might happen. During her last prenatal checkup, she had seen the sideways glances the doctor gave her when she mentioned she lived in a shelter. She had seen the forms quietly filled out, the questions asked in the tone of people preparing for something. But she didn't believe they would actually take her baby. Not like this. "Let me name him," she choked, holding her arms out. "Please, just one name, and one touch, one time." After a long, awful pause, the younger social worker stepped forward. She looked back at her superior, who frowned but gave a tight nod. They brought in the tiny baby, wrapped in a white hospital blanket. He was so small, his fists clenched, his cry already softening as he neared his mother. The nurse laid him gently in Clara's arms. Clara stared at him like she was trying to memorize every inch, the curve of his chin, the fuzz on his head, the shape of his tiny lips. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she kissed his forehead. "I'll call you Noah," she whispered, voice cracking. Because even in the flood, there was hope. Moments later, they took him away. She tried to stand, tried to follow, but her body gave out. All she could do was scream after them. "Don't let him forget me." They didn't respond. The doors closed behind them. And just like that, Noah was gone. The hospital discharged Clara 2 days later. She left without balloons, without flowers, without a car seat strapped with a newborn. The nurse at the front desk gave her a sympathetic look and a brown envelope with follow-up resources she'd never open. Outside, the late October air stung her lungs. She walked aimlessly for hours, ignoring the ache in her body, the heaviness in her chest. The shelter where she had been staying was only a few blocks away, but Clara couldn't bear the thought of going back there. Not yet, not without Noah. She ended up at the city park bench where she and her late mother used to sit and feed pigeons. She sank down, numb, and for the first time in days, allowed her tears to come in silence. The pain of childbirth had been intense, yes, but this pain was crueler. It came in waves, lodged deep in the soul, a kind of grief that stole the breath from her lungs and made the world feel gray. Each minute stretched on like an hour. Days blurred into each other. People came and went, some offering pity, others judgment. Clara said little to anyone. She clutched the little hospital bracelet she had slipped off Noah's wrist before they took him away. The only physical proof she had that he'd ever been in her arms. Weeks passed. She tried calling the Child Protective Services office again and again, but they fed her rehearsed lines. "The child is under review, ma'am. You were deemed temporarily unfit. We'll reassess once the court completes your evaluation." But no evaluation ever came. No one returned her calls. Then one rainy afternoon, she showed up at their downtown office in person. Her clothes were soaked, her cheeks hollow, but her eyes burned with a fierce determination. She stood in front of the glass window, her voice shaking. "I'm not leaving until someone tells me where my son is," she said. Security tried to escort her out. A caseworker named Janine finally came to speak with her. She looked uncomfortable, like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Ms. Mason, I understand this is difficult," Janine began, her voice soft but formal. "But the court has approved temporary placement with a licensed foster family. You were sent a notification. I don't have an address. I'm staying in a shelter." "You knew that," Clara snapped. "Please, just tell me where he is. I'll get a job. I'll find housing. I just need to know he's safe." Janine sighed and looked down at her clipboard. "The foster family caring for him has reported that he's healthy and developing well. That's all I can share for now. But if you complete your case plan, therapy, employment, stable housing, you can petition for reunification." Clara clung to those words. Petition for reunification. It was a thin rope in a storm, but it was something. So she got to work. She took a janitorial job at a local community center. Barely enough to afford groceries, but it was income. She enrolled in weekly therapy sessions, walking 5 miles to make each appointment. She moved out of the shelter into a small studio apartment on the edge of town. And every night, before sleeping, she whispered the same words into the dark. "I'm coming for you, Noah. Mommy hasn't forgotten you." For 2 years, Clara fought. She checked every box, filed every form, completed every requirement. And finally, one gray December morning, she walked into family court with trembling hands and a hopeful heart. The judge reviewed her paperwork. Her social worker submitted her progress reports. Everything should have gone in her favor, but then came the blow. "The child has been adopted by the foster family," the judge said flatly. "The adoption was finalized 9 months ago." Clara didn't understand. "But no one told me. No one said I missed a deadline. How could they do that without telling me?" The courtroom was quiet. The papers had been sent to the shelter she no longer stayed in. Her right to contest had expired. Her screams echoed in that cold courtroom. The bailiff moved toward her, but the judge raised a hand. "You may appeal," he said without emotion. "But given the circumstances, the adoption is considered legally binding." Clara collapsed to the floor, clutching the photograph she'd finally received of Noah. Now a toddler with bright eyes and curly hair. He was happy, it seemed, but she wasn't. She had lost him, or so she thought. The courtroom felt colder than the hospital room had that day. At least there, she'd gotten to hold him. At least then, she still had hope. Clara stumbled out of the courthouse, the photo of Noah clenched in her hand like a lifeline. Her vision blurred as she sat down on the steps outside, the December wind cutting through her coat. People passed her by. Lawyers, other families, strangers with no idea of the storm that had just ripped through her soul. Her baby was gone. Not temporarily, not conditionally, legally. She had done everything they asked of her. Every meeting, every session, every hoop. And still, the system had failed her, or maybe it had never planned to let her win at all. For the next few months, Clara drifted through life in a fog. She went to work, paid her bills, but barely spoke. Her apartment remained painfully quiet. She had removed the small crib she once bought off Craigslist, the one she'd held onto just in case. The baby clothes were donated, the toys boxed away, but she couldn't throw out the photo. She placed it in a small frame on the corner of her nightstand. Every morning, she touched it lightly, whispering a single phrase, "I still love you." Noah was growing up without her, with strangers, and she couldn't even know their names. The records were sealed. His location, his school, Even the city where he now lived were hidden under a veil of protection. She was left with nothing but questions. Did he still like warm milk at night? Did he cry when he was scared? Did he ever ask where he came from? The anger came later, a slow, simmering rage that burned beneath the surface. Not at Noah, not ever, but at a system that punished her for being poor, for being vulnerable, for not fitting into the perfect mold of worthy mother. She wasn't abusive. She wasn't a drug addict. She had simply been alone. It was during one of those hollow nights, alone in her apartment with the TV flickering background noise, that Clara made a decision. She would write him a letter, even if he never read it, even if it never reached him. She pulled out a notepad and began scribbling in a shaky hand. Dear Noah, you don't know me now, but once, I held you for 5 minutes. You looked at me with the tiniest brown eyes, and I knew I would love you forever. They told me I wasn't enough, that I couldn't take care of you, but they never asked if I would fight for you. I did. I still am. Every single day I breathe is for you. She wrote for an hour, pouring out everything she had carried silently for years. Her fears, her regrets, her promises. When she finished, she folded the letter and tucked it in an envelope. She wrote for Noah Mason on the front and sealed it shut. Then she added it to a shoebox full of writings, pictures, newspaper clippings, anything she thought he might want to see someday. A box labeled simply, "In case he ever finds me," and she held onto that box like it was sacred. Years passed. Clara never stopped thinking about him. But she didn't wallow anymore. She got a promotion at work, moved to a slightly better apartment, even started volunteering at a local youth center to help kids like Noah. Kids who just needed someone to fight for them. And then, one summer afternoon, just days before what would have been Noah's 10th birthday, Clara received something she never expected. A plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single page. Ms. Mason, you don't know me, but I believe you may be my birth mother. My name is Noah Green. I'm 16. I found some documents my adoptive parents kept hidden, and I've been trying to piece things together. I don't know if you'll even see this, but if you're out there, I want to know the truth. Please write me back. Noah. Clara dropped the page. Her hands shook as she clutched her chest. 16? Had it been that long? It felt like yesterday, and yet it had been an entire childhood. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she opened the shoebox. She pulled out the very first letter, the one she'd written so long ago. The paper was yellowed slightly at the edges, but the words still burned with emotion. With trembling fingers, Clara wrote back. The letter sat on Clara's kitchen table for hours. She read it over and over again, fingers tracing the words like they might disappear if she looked away. Her heart thudded in her chest like it had the first time she held Noah. That brief and precious moment that had sustained her through years of absence. He was real. He remembered. He had found her. She had dreamt of this moment 1,000 times. Rehearsed it in her mind like a movie, what she'd say, how she'd explain, how she'd apologize for not being there. But none of those imagined moments had prepared her for the actual reality of it. Her son had grown up without her, and now he was old enough to seek her out. Clara finally sat down, her pen trembling in her hand, and began to write, Dear Noah, you have no idea how long I've waited to hear from you. You're not just a name to me, you're a part of my soul. I only held you for a moment, but I've held you in my heart every day since. I need you to know I never gave you up. They took you from me. I fought so hard to get you back. I don't know what you've been told or what you've lived through, but if there's room in your life, in your heart, for me, I'd do anything to get to know you. You deserve the truth. You deserve to know you were always loved. Forever, Clara, your mom. She added her phone number and address, then stared at the envelope as if afraid it might catch fire in her hands. After a deep breath, she mailed it the next morning. Then she waited. Every time her phone buzzed, she jumped. Every knock on the door made her heart leap. She even signed up for email alerts on her phone, checking her inbox obsessively. The world outside continued as normal. People went to work, kids played in the streets, but for Clara, time had frozen. 10 days passed. Then, one Friday evening, just as the sun dipped below the rooftops, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stared at it, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then she answered. Hello. A pause. Then a voice? Low, cautious, cracking with nerves. Is this Clara Mason? Her breath caught. Yes, it is. Another pause. It's Noah. I got your letter. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She covered her mouth for a moment, trying to speak without sobbing. Noah, my Noah, she said softly. He didn't respond immediately. She could hear a shaky breath on the other end. I don't know why I'm crying, he said, his voice cracking. I don't even remember you. When I found your name, something just felt like I had to know. Clara nodded even though he couldn't see her. I understand, and you don't have to feel anything you're not ready for. But I am here. I'm here if you want to talk, or write, or meet. I'll follow your lead. There was a long pause. Then he asked something that nearly broke her. Did you love me? Even after I was gone? Clara clutched the photo of him, the old hospital bracelet still tucked in her keepsake drawer. I never stopped, she whispered. Not for 1 second. They talked for 2 hours. About everything and nothing. About what he liked, basketball, science fiction, playing guitar. He told her he had a dog named Max. That he was thinking of applying to college. That he'd always felt a little off in his adopted home. Like something had been missing. He didn't ask about why he was taken right away. He wasn't ready. And she didn't push. But before they hung up, he said something that made Clara's knees buckle beneath her. I'd like to meet you, if that's okay. Her voice shook. That's more than okay. That's everything. The plan was simple. They would meet at the botanical gardens just outside of town, neutral, quiet, open. Clara had suggested it because the idea of meeting him in a loud diner or a sterile office made her skin crawl. No, she wanted this to be natural, if anything about this could be. She arrived an hour early. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She wore a soft blue blouse, the one her late mother had always said brought out her eyes. In her purse was the same shoebox, the one filled with mementos and letters she'd written over the years. She didn't know if he'd want to see it, but she had to bring it. Every few minutes, she checked her phone. No messages, no cancellations, and then, at precisely 3 p.m., a tall, lanky teenager with dark brown curls and wide, searching eyes stepped through the entrance gate. Clara stood slowly as he spotted her and paused. They both stared for a moment that felt like an eternity. Two people trying to recognize something invisible but deeply rooted. Noah? She asked. Her voice small, he nodded, hands shoved nervously in his pockets. Yeah, hi. Clara stepped forward, tears already in her eyes. I won't hug you unless you're okay with it. He didn't speak. He just walked forward and wrapped his arms around her tightly. Clara nearly crumbled. She held on to him like he was air and she'd been drowning for 16 years. He was real. He was warm. He was her son. And for the first time since that hospital room, she felt whole again. They sat on a nearby bench, the late summer sunlight filtering through the leaves. Noah glanced at her. You look like me. Or I guess I look like you. Clara laughed through her tears. You have your dad's chin though. And his ears. He smirked. Great. I've always hated my ears. They talked, slowly, cautiously. Clara didn't dive into the heavy stuff. She let him lead. He asked about where she lived, what she did, if she liked dogs. She told him about her community center job, about how she worked with teens and gave them someone to talk to when they didn't have anyone else. He watched her closely, as if memorizing her face. You never had other kids? Clara shook her head. No. After they took you, I couldn't imagine ever going through that again. He looked away for a moment, chewing on his lip. My adoptive mom was strict, controlling. I always thought she was just overprotective. But after I found the papers, it all made sense. What papers? Clara asked, her heart beating faster. Noah pulled out a folded sheet from his backpack. I found this in a locked drawer. It's the adoption decree. But there's something weird. There's a note from a social worker saying the mother, you, was never notified of the final adoption hearing. I think they did it behind your back. Clara felt the wind knock from her lungs. She had always suspected it, but seeing it confirmed, in black and white, brought a surge of emotions she wasn't ready for. Anger, grief, validation. They told me I missed the deadline, she whispered. They never told me when it was. I thought it was my fault. Noah looked up at her, his eyes fierce. It wasn't. They didn't want you to come back. I think they thought I'd forget you. Clara blinked back tears. But you didn't. No, he said, voice low. I never could. They walked through the gardens for another hour, trading memories. Hers of the days she spent fighting for him. His of a childhood that always felt like it was missing a page. Before he left, he stopped and turned to her. Would it be okay if we did this again? Clara smiled, her heart aching and soaring at once. There is nothing I'd want more. He nodded. Cool. Maybe, next time, you could show me some baby pictures or something? She opened her bag and handed him the shoebox. These are for you, she said. Noah took the box and held it close. Thanks, Mom. And just like that, the world tilted back into place. The next few weeks felt like a dream Clara didn't want to wake from. Noah called almost every day, sometimes just to say hi, other times to ask questions about his baby years, her life, his biological father. Clara answered everyone, even when it hurt. She promised herself she'd never lie to him. Not now. Not when honesty had finally brought him back. They met every Saturday, sometimes at the gardens, other times at quiet cafes or parks where they could just sit and talk. He brought her stories from his childhood, and she brought him pieces of his past. A tiny rattle, an ultrasound photo, the hospital wristband that still bore his name and birth weight. One day, he asked, "Did you ever try to find me?" Clara paused, folding her hands tightly. They sealed everything. I went to court, tried to appeal, but they told me the adoption was closed and final. That I had no rights. He stared at the table. I wish I'd known. I wish you'd never had to wonder, she replied. But just as the fragile bridge between them was growing stronger, a storm began to brew on the horizon. Noah's adoptive parents found out. Clara came home to a knock on her apartment door one Thursday evening. When she opened it, a woman stood there, mid-50s, sharply dressed, with steel in her eyes and a deep frown etched into her face. Clara Mason? She asked coldly. Yes, Clara said, heart sinking. The woman held up a small legal envelope. You're interfering with a legal guardianship agreement. I don't know what lies you've told my son, but you are not his mother. Clara blinked. I haven't told him anything that isn't true. You're poisoning him, the woman snapped. He's been distant, defiant, questioning everything. And now I find out it's because you've been manipulating him behind our backs. Clara swallowed hard. He reached out to me. He found me. The woman's jaw clenched. He's a child. He's 16. And he deserves to know where he came from. There was a long pause, filled with so much tension the air itself seemed to vibrate. I'm warning you, the woman hissed. Back off. If you really cared about him, you'd stay away. Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking like gunshots on the pavement. Clara closed the door slowly, leaning her forehead against the frame. Her hands were shaking. Later that night, Noah called. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean for it to get ugly. She came to my door, Clara whispered. She threatened me. Noah cursed under his breath. She went too far. I'm not a kid anymore. I can choose who I want in my life. Clara hesitated. I don't want to cause more pain for you. You didn't, he said firmly. Finding you, knowing the truth, that saved me. But Clara knew this wasn't over. And she also knew there was something bigger happening. Something hidden in those adoption documents. That note from the social worker had bothered her for weeks. The missing court notice. The silence that followed her appeals. The adoption hadn't just been unfair, it had been rigged. And if that were true, then someone would do anything to keep that secret buried. Clara couldn't sleep. The visit from Noah's adoptive mother played over and over in her mind. But more than the threats, it was the way she had said one word, manipulating. As if Clara's very existence was some sort of weapon. That night, Clara dug through her storage closet and pulled out the box she hadn't touched in years. the one labeled court docs. It was filled with paper, letters, legal briefs, certified mail receipts, copies of appeals. And right there, in the middle of it all, was the court date she was never notified about. But what caught her eye was something else. A name. Judge Robert Calloway. She recognized it immediately. He had presided over her case when Noah was first taken from her as an infant. And he was the one who finalized the adoption years later. She had begged for a different judge, but was denied. The same man had handled everything, from the emergency custody ruling to the closed adoption. Clara's instincts screamed. She opened her laptop and began to search. Judge Calloway had retired 5 years ago. But what caught her attention was a small investigative article buried deep online. It detailed questionable rulings he'd made regarding child custody cases. Specifically, a pattern of decisions disproportionately favoring adoptive families connected to specific private agencies. Clara's heart thudded. She searched the name of Noah's adoptive agency, Safe Start Families. And there it was, 3 mentions in the article, all involving cases where young mothers had lost their parental rights abruptly and inexplicably. 2 had tried to appeal. None had succeeded. She printed the article and the court docs and called an old friend, someone she hadn't spoken to in years, Angela Reyes, a legal aid worker who had once helped her try to regain custody. Angela agreed to meet for coffee the next day. When Clara arrived, Angela was already there, flipping through the papers. Her face was pale. "This is more than a coincidence," she said quietly. "I remember your case. There were red flags back then, but we didn't have proof." Clara leaned in. "Do you think the adoption was illegal?" Angela hesitated. "I think it was engineered. That social worker who wrote the note, Lila Kinsey. I've heard her name before. She was flagged in 2 other cases for procedural misconduct. So what do I do now?" Angela looked at her with grim resolve. "We dig. We find out who knew what. And if we can prove this adoption was obtained fraudulently, you might be able to reopen the case." Clara's breath caught. "You mean I could get custody back?" Angela nodded. "At the very least, you could expose the truth. You were robbed, Clara. And you're not the only one." It was like a dam broke inside her. For 16 years, Clara had carried guilt like a second skin. But now, she could feel it beginning to peel away. What if it hadn't been her failure? What if it had been a system designed to break her? Noah deserved to know. She called him that night and told him everything. He listened in silence. Then, softly, "I want to help. I want to know who did this to us." Clara's eyes filled. "You're sure?" "Yeah, because if they did it to you, they probably did it to others." The next week, they began digging together, interviewing other parents from Clara's old support group, requesting public records, and searching archives. Piece by piece, a picture emerged. A disturbing pattern of predatory adoption practices, all tied to Judge Calloway, the agency, and a private network of donors and family law attorneys. They were uncovering a scandal. And someone was starting to notice. Clara hadn't felt fear like this in years. It started with a phone call in the middle of the night. When she answered, there was only silence and then a click. The next morning, her mailbox had been pried open. Her apartment door, usually secure, showed faint signs of tampering. Nothing taken, nothing broken, just a warning. Noah noticed it too. His adoptive parents had become increasingly hostile. His father, usually silent, had suddenly forbidden him from seeing Clara. "You'll forget her again, just like you were meant to," he snapped when Noah confronted him. But Noah wasn't the same boy he'd been before. Now he had questions. He had purpose. And he wasn't going to let it go. Together, he and Clara compiled the documents, the sealed files, the adoption report with the mysterious discrepancies, the court ruling that was never shared, the article linking Judge Calloway to other suspicious cases. Angela, Clara's legal aid friend, connected them with an investigative reporter at a small but fearless online outlet known for exposing corruption. Her name was Reese Darby, and from the moment she heard the story, she was all in. "You don't just have a tragedy," Reese said. "You have a bombshell. If what you're saying is true, this could expose a network of illegal adoptions masked as child welfare." But Clara hesitated. "What happens when we go public? Reese didn't sugarcoat it. They'll try to discredit you, to silence you. But if your documentation holds up, and if Noah is willing to go on record, this could blow the doors off the whole thing. Noah nodded. I'll do it. People deserve to know. So they did. A week later, the article went live. The headline read, "Adoption for sale? Judge? Agency tied to network of questionable custody transfers." Within hours, it went viral. Interviews followed. National outlets picked up the story. The comments poured in, some supportive, others cruel. But most were from mothers who had suffered the same fate. Quiet victims of a system stacked against them. But not everyone was cheering. 2 days after the story dropped, Clara received a cease and desist letter from a high-powered law firm representing the now-defunct adoption agency. Threats of a defamation suit. Demands to retract the story. Reese laughed. That means it's working. But Noah wasn't laughing. His adoptive mother called him into her study one evening and dropped a folder on the table. "I read the article," she said bitterly. "And I read your quotes." Noah stood still. She opened the folder. Inside were private notes, school files, therapy reports, everything about him cataloged and organized. Her eyes were cold. "You were a troubled baby. Did you know that? You had tantrums, attachment issues. You cried constantly." Noah felt his chest tighten. "I was a baby. You were broken. We fixed you. And now you want to throw us away." He stepped back. "You didn't fix me. You erased her." For the first time in years, his mother's composure cracked. "You don't know what it was like. You don't know what we sacrificed." But Noah didn't care anymore. The love he once felt for them was now tangled in lies and manipulation. He left that night and showed up at Clara's doorstep, a single duffel bag in his hand. "I don't care if it's temporary," he said, "but I can't live there anymore." Clara stood in the doorway, stunned, then slowly opened her arms. "You're home," she said softly. "As long as you need to be." The courthouse smelled the same. Stale paper, old wood polish, and something else. The quiet, suffocating weight of bureaucracy that had once crushed Clara's world. But today, she wasn't the same woman who had left this place empty-handed 16 years ago. Today, she had her son by her side. The news story had made waves, enough to prompt a formal investigation into Judge Calloway's past decisions. A growing number of families had come forward, their stories echoing Clara's almost verbatim. And under mounting pressure, the district attorney reopened several sealed adoption cases, including hers. Clara, Noah, and Angela walked past reporters, their microphones outstretched like weapons. But Clara didn't stop. She wasn't here for cameras. She was here for justice. Inside the courtroom, she recognized the new judge, a woman known for being fair, progressive, and meticulous. A breath of fresh air in a system that had once suffocated her. Angela laid out the case methodically. The improperly filed notices, the suspicious behavior of the agency, the connection to Judge Calloway, and the psychological harm Noah had endured being denied the truth of his origins. Clara testified with composure and heartbreak, recounting every step she took, every door slammed in her face, every moment she was told she didn't deserve to be a mother. And then it was Noah's turn. He stood with confidence, despite his shaking hands. "I was told she abandoned me, that she didn't fight for me. But that wasn't true. I found out she wrote me every year. She tried to come to court and no one told her when. I read the legal documents. The system failed her. And it failed me." The courtroom was silent. Then the judge spoke. After reviewing the documents, it's clear this adoption did not follow lawful procedure. The consent hearing was scheduled without appropriate notice, and the adoptive agency appears to have worked in tandem with then-Judge Calloway in a manner that raises serious ethical and legal concerns. Clara's heart pounded. "I am ordering an official investigation into Safe Start Families and referring this matter to the State Ethics Board," the judge continued. "Furthermore, while Noah is nearing adulthood, I am granting temporary joint custody between Clara Mason and his legal guardians until his 18th birthday, at which point he may petition for full transfer." Clara's hands flew to her mouth. Angela gripped her shoulder tightly. Noah turned to her, eyes wide and misty. "You did it," He whispered. No, Clara said, smiling through tears. We did. Outside, the press swarmed again. But this time Clara wasn't afraid. She held her son's hand as they walked down the courthouse steps. The world watching a mother and son who had finally been reunited not by fate, but by truth, by courage, by love that refused to die. Later that night, as they sat in her living room, Noah asked, Do you think they'll really face consequences? I hope so, Clara said. But even if they don't, they can't take this from us again. Noah leaned back, smiling. You know what's weird? What? This is the first time I've ever felt like I really know who I am. Clara smiled. You're strong. You're kind. You're my son. He nodded. And you're my mom. Always were. Always will be. The world didn't change overnight. Safe Start Families was shut down within 3 months. Its board members subpoenaed in a sweeping state-led inquiry into unethical adoption practices. Former Judge Calloway declined interviews, but his name was plastered across every headline from coast to coast. Families, dozens of them, filed suits. Some cases were reopened. Some were not. But the system had been cracked open, exposed under the harsh light of truth. As for Clara and Noah, their lives began to settle into something rare and new: peace. They cooked together, argued over music, took long drives with the windows down. Sometimes they sat in silence, just learning to exist in each other's space. There were awkward moments, growing pains. 16 years was a long time to make up for, but they were both committed. Every morning, Clara made 2 cups of coffee, one with too much sugar, just the way Noah liked it. Every evening, Noah sat on the couch next to her, either with homework or his guitar, learning how to play again, this time with someone who clapped after every off-key note. One Saturday, Noah handed Clara an envelope. Inside was a college application essay. The prompt was simple. Write about someone who changed your life. He had written about her. Not the perfect mother. Not the fairy tale reunion. But her, the girl who had fought for him when she had nothing, who had never given up, even when the world told her to forget. His words were raw, unfiltered, and powerful. Clara cried the entire time she read it. You're going to change the world, she whispered. Holding the paper to her heart, he smiled. I already changed mine. A year later, Noah stood at his high school graduation in a borrowed cap and gown, looking out over a sea of parents and families. Clara was in the front row, hands clenched in her lap, barely breathing. When they called his name, she stood up, clapping so loudly her hands stung. He found her afterward in the crowd, lifting her off the ground in a hug that made every lost moment feel like it had somehow led here. You made it, she whispered. We both did. That night, they went home and opened a bottle of sparkling cider. They toasted to the future, to resilience, to truth. Noah spoke first. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't found each other? Clara nodded. All the time. And she looked at him, the boy who had been taken from her, the young man he had become. I think we'd both still be waiting, she said. Me waiting for a chance. You waiting for the truth. He took a sip of cider, thoughtful. We got both. Clara smiled, tears in her eyes. Yes, we did. And as they sat side by side, the soft hum of summer crickets in the distance, Clara realized something. She hadn't just regained her son. She had rewritten her story. From a stolen beginning to a reclaimed ending. And this time, no one could take it away.